And we are live. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Let's Talk Fishing podcast. The Let's Talk Fishing podcast, guys, brought to you by Grant Rods, the American Bass Club, and of course, Crusher Lures. With me tonight, I have a lady who's been she's been with me since the very beginning of the Let's Talk Fishing podcast, back when I was doing an audio podcast, and I just had a phone and a dream. But anyways, without further ado, I would like to introduce a very special lady. A lady who's a fierce competitor in the competitive bass world in Northeastern Illinois. I have none other than Violet Talley. How are you doing tonight, Violet?
I'm great, Jay. Thank you for asking. I appreciate the podcast. This is awesome.
Thank you. Violet, it's the deep summer. Down here in the South, it's like trying to fish in February.
Yeah.
Where you live. It's miserable conditions. Guys are still going out there, but I lived up there where you live for, only the first 45 years of my life,
Right.
This time of the year, you deal with dying weeds. Mm-hmm. You deal with thermoclines. You deal with intense pressure, and not fishing pressure, but pressure on the lakes, boaters, wakeboards, jet skis, all kinds of things that make it difficult to catch fish. And those are just ripping up the weed beds, and it's making the water murkier than it was.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that as a person who has to catch fish like you? I think you fish, 2 tournaments a week on average?
On average, about 2 tournaments a week. I have 3 different bodies of water that I fish at, and they're all vastly different. I have a river system, I have a shallow lake chain system, and then I have a deep water clear system. So I have 3 completely different water systems. So I deal with all those things on all 3 bodies of water. So it's great because it makes me, I'm actually proud of it because it makes me a versatile angler. So
it sure does.
A lot of situations. And what you just mentioned, all those boaters, and, it's bad enough you have to figure out what the fish are doing and what the weather's doing. But now we have to strategize boat traffic into it. And yes. I can't tell you how much strategy goes into, okay, so what time do the boaters go on the water? What kind of boaters are we dealing with? What can we attack based on who's going to be out there, not just what the fish are doing, what the weather's doing, what the wind's doing, whatever. So, yeah, now you added boaters into the strategy. But the nice thing is the pattern that's going on right now is pretty much going to remain consistent throughout the summer into the fall. So we have the spring pattern, we have the summer pattern, and then we have the fall pattern. And the summer pattern is the longest pattern. So I kind of call this is like my average for the year. So
sure.
The fish don't fluctuate much, but there's gonna different spots of different bodies of water are going to turn on and off. So it's going to be kind of the same style fishing. It's just a matter of where they're going to be at what time of the day.
I completely agree with you. So like on the Fox chain, are you still fishing the bank, or have you gotten off the bank yet?
Yes and no. I'm getting off the bank now. We're fishing a lot of the weed lines because the weed growth is pretty prominent right now, and a lot of the back. Forget the channels. The channels are done. I mean, they are choke weeds, algae, you name it. And then even though there's weed kill, a lot of people will kill the weeds using chemicals or whatnot. Some of the docks are still open where, you got a lot of the weeds will not grow underneath the docks or underneath boats, but you'll have a lot of weed growth around it. So you gotta give and take. A lot of points, a lot of rock points and seawalls. Because what's funny is along the seawall is gold because along the seawall is usually built onto some sort of gravel or rock. Okay. So nothing's going to grow there. As you go out and maybe a couple feet out, then the weed growth starts. So I'll have a lot of lakes on the chain that have seawall where there's gravel and rock for the first 2 feet. And so you'll see it's all clear water. So the fish use it as a highway system. They go back and forth along the wall. And as you go further back, offshore, it turns into lily pads or grass. So a lot of times we have to get very strategic with how we cast, and we have to be ready to pull those fish through the weeds in case we do get a fish attack our bait on the wall. Now you got to pull them through all that stuff on the way back to the boat. But a lot of things that we've been doing lately is we've been fishing what I call like offshore on the chain, would be more like 5-6 foot of water where the weed growth starts to die off or filters, gets a little bit of water. But I'll still throw into that weed edge or those holes where the weeds start to break up and the fish are sitting in those little clumps of weeds. The reason I know that too is because I've thrown a lot of swim jigs or I've thrown topwater, and the reaction bites are explosive. So they're coming out of those weeds blindly reacting, grabbing that bait, and half the bites now we're missing because they're all reaction bites now. They're not really eating. They're just sitting there till something comes by, and they go out into the light and they react. So, I mean, like last night I had a Wednesday night tournament. I had, four major blowups on a topwater, and I only really hooked one.
Dang.
And
So
rod, reel, whatever, I don't think that's the case. It was more of just the type of reaction it was.
What are you using for topwater this time of the year?
Topwater right now I'm using like a 7-foot medium Grant Rod's Cuda series. So it's got enough soft action for it to give a little bit, so I'm not ripping through the mouth of the fish, but enough backbone so I can pull them through. If they decide to grab it and go under, I got that backbone to bring it in. I'm using 30-pound plus braid, depending on which topwater I use.
Are you tying direct to that?
J-braid Grand is amazing. I go that light so I have castability. I can cast it a little bit further. Sometimes I got to cast it. I'll cast it way out to the lily pads, and I'll snake it around the lily pads, because the more grass I can go around, the more lily pads. They're sitting under that, so I want to cover as much water as I can and try to get them to come and strike underneath it. So
are you tying direct with braid?
Yeah, for the topwater I am. When it comes to, I'll throw a wacky worm or a power worm. A power worm's been doing really well, like a 10-inch or a 7-inch power worm, or a dead ringer worm, something that's got some sort of a curly tail to it.
My favorite, I discovered a wacky worm about 2.5 years ago called Missile Baits. I see that you're wearing a Missile Baits hat. The 48.
The 48, that has become my new favorite. I love that.
I used it the first time, and I'm like, what is this? And the guy who turned me onto it said, what you're using is just sinking way too slowly. I'm like, well, don't you want it to sink slowly? He goes, that depends. Of course that depends. You know this. He said, you're fishing in 5 to 8 feet of water.
Yeah.
You don't want something to take 2 minutes to get down to the bottom. Now, if you were fishing, I'm down here in southern Louisiana, 5 to 8 feet of water is like the Fox chain. That's deep.
Right. And then you got that weed growth that's meeting you halfway up, and those fish are just kind of snaked in there. So you want something you don't want something that's going to get to the bottom. It's going to be in the sludge and the grass. You don't want something that's going to necessarily sit on top, because they may not go after top water. One thing I notice is the higher the humidity is outside, the more they're going after top water and frogs. So if that humidity is low, then what do you do? So you throw like some sort of a wacky style worm, and the missile is great because it's fat on two ends. So it gives you that wobble as it goes down. And
but also it sinks. It sinks. Doesn't sink as fast as a Senko.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, it does.
But it sinks much more slowly than a traditional wacky worm.
Right.
And, every bait company has their own spin on the wacky worm, but they all look just about the same until John Cruz came along and made the 48. I have Derek Cudnell on. He's one of my regular guests, and he's one of an Elite Series pro. He lives about 15 miles away from me. So I go over there, and he'll flip me 6 or 7 packs of them.
Yeah.
Thank you, my new best friend.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'd show you. I just realized I have them all in my boat because I threw every single color I had, because that's what I use the most on the chain. So they're all through those all in my boat. But I do have some of the other missile bait stuff that we're going to talk about. But the 48, it's a little newer to me, because when I found out that was their version of the Senko, because it didn't look like traditional Senko, because it's fat it's a little fatter. It's not very fat, but it's a little fatter on both ends. And then when I saw the action of it, I said, okay, now this is great. And I use the bands, and those bands work on those 48s.
Derek Hudnall is one of the guys I consider to be one of the best finesse fishermen in the business. Mm-hmm. And he will skin hook that thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe we could show that. You have one of their new products, don't you?
Yes, I have the new missile baits, the Magic Worm. And the Magic Worm, it's funny because I actually been using it. It's actually made by RoboWorm. So the Magic Worm is there. What I use it for is mostly drop shot, and it's a thinner worm. You can use it actually. You know what you could do is I used to use a jackal worm sometimes if I want to use a Senko, but I don't want to use a Senko where it's like so thick. I want it to have a little bit more action in the water. You can wacky rig this. So this is the Missile Baits Magic Worm. This is the what do you call it? This is the Blueback Secret. This is a different color. I kind of like this one because it's got kind of that watermelon purple.
Look at that.
That watermelon purple is a really nice color to have, but it's got that like lighter action, so you can whack it, you can nose hook it, which is what I usually do for drop shot. And this is the best drop shot I've ever used. I use it on the consistently.
Funny You mentioned dropship. Jim Grant sent me one of these. This is the new Finesse.
Yeah. Is
See
that the
if I can
Cuda
get that
series?
in.
Okay, yeah.
Oh no, this is a Cuda.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the Cuda series. The Finesse is its own line.
Yeah, Cuda. You know, I also love my Cuda.
Oh yeah, I have several Cudas. I love them.
Yes,
All. They're my
Cuda.
favorite because they got that backbone. Yeah, I don't have a Finesse rod yet. You're privileged because I don't have one yet.
Cuda is just. I mean, look at this. This is going to be my new favorite. I'm going to bring this up north next time I come up there because I want. I've used this for throwing swim baits for speckled trout down here. I've used it for wacky rigging. You know, the 48.
Yeah.
But this is just, and also look what I have on there.
The Daiwa, which one?
That's a Kaje.
Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah, that's
It's
a
look at that reel, guys. I mean, geez. This on a Finesse.
Try an Exist. Have you tried an Exist yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well then don't or do because you'll never go back.
Never go back to the Kaje if I try and
You'll
Exist.
never go back to any spinning reel ever again once you use an Exist. I actually, when I did my Mercury event, I was a little afraid because the Exist it's an $800 reel, but there's a reason for it. And you'll see once you use it, it's just amazing. And I have the 2500 series and I use that for my wacky. And I just got a medium Cuda. I got a 6'6" medium Cuda because I do a lot of wacky under stuff. And
I like the 6'6".
Yep, that's what I have, a 6'6". I told Jim, I said, Jim, can you give me the perfect wacky rod? I mean, I know what I'm looking for, but I think you know. And man, he hit it on the head. He goes, you're getting the 6'6" Cuda series, medium action. And I have not turned back since. Well,
that's what I ordered from him, a 6'6" Cuda EXT, medium action.
EXT, that's what I have. And I put it in the hands of this gentleman who had never used anything before. And the first thing he said as soon as he cast it goes, wow, this is nice. He hooked into, actually, I gave it to him and he caught a walleye on it because I put a different jig on it because I figured it would be very sensitive enough. He couldn't believe how smooth and how easy it was to work that fish back. He said that rod did all the work. And it was awesome.
Here's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
6'6" Cuda EXT.
And I got an equivalent, so I use that on the spinning rod, and I got an equivalent in the medium 6'6" for. Surprisingly enough, I'm using it as a frogging rod. So I got a medium 6'6" bait caster because I use it for a small frog that I use in and around close cover and docks on the chain, and it is fantastic. My partner looked at me and says, "Are you sure that thing can handle a frog bite?" I said, "Watch," and I had no problem pulling those fish. You know, there's no effort to it.
I agree. That's when you have a
people
superior rod.
I'm using a medium rod on a frog, and I said, but you don't understand. It's a structure rod. It's for structure, and it's enough to whip that. I can whip that frog anywhere and have plenty of backbone to pull it out of anything.
I bet you can.
Oh yeah, easy.
Well, I use these little rods down here on southern bass. Mm-hmm. That you have a potential of getting a 7-pounder in most of the places I fish.
Right.
A couple of them are actually famous for 10-pounder. I've never laid into anything that big, but I think I hooked into one time. But I had a lesser rod. I just could not bring it in.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about that with these. I've actually pulled in big, with my Cuda EXT, I pulled in a 15-pound red eye, and that's a heck of a fish right there.
Well, I have
it took me a while, but
Yeah. I have a 7-foot medium light Pyara rod, what I use for my drop shot. So ultra sensitive, super sensitive, nice 7 foot, so I can whip that bait out there. I put that in the hands of I was going to put that in the hands of the kid that was in my boat, but I was using it to pre-fish the day before because I was looking for that light bite of that walleye. I hooked into a sturgeon.
A sturgeon? Oh.
A sturgeon. I hooked into a sturgeon. It went everywhere, went under the boat, bent the whole rod over. I was able to pull them up, but my line broke. But the rod handled it just fine. Medium light 7-foot Pyara, I had no issue. I had no problem. Problem is I just didn't retie. That was my fault.
So what did you use? You were recently up in Green Bay.
Yeah, I was in the Winneconne chain. Or I was in Sturgeon Bay earlier this year in spring.
Yes.
But I went to Winneconne chain just this last weekend.
Okay, well, when you were in Sturgeon Bay.
Yeah.
What kind of presentations were you employing?
In Sturgeon Bay, we used a lot of tubes. But the number one bait that I used a dark sleeper, and it was unbelievable.
A dark one?
Dark sleeper, okay? It's
I
made by
thought that's
Megabass, the goby imitation.
Ah,
So it looks just like a goby. They've become pretty popular. Megabass just came out with something called the Sleeper Gill, which is similar, but it looks like a bluegill. Those are very hard to get right now. But the dark sleepers, I used them in a particular color, and I threw them like I would a tube or a jig. I would throw it out there, and I let it sit on the bottom, and I would just slowly crawl it, either very slow crawl or crawl in a pause. And it got hit 4 or 5 times on its way back to the boat. We went up to Ephraim,
yes.
and we found a spot where it was literally, my partner couldn't put the net down. He finally says to me, "Can I please put the net down so I can fish?" Because I kept just one after another. Every time, got one, nothing like it ever. And that thing did great. It's just, you got to be slow on that presentation. They like it very, very slow. It's got to act like a goby. Gobies don't fly through the water. They slowly creep and crawl. So, but it's the best goby imitator. I think Bass Pro Shops has one and a couple other people, but they don't even compare. But the Dark Sleeper by Megabass has been, and you can use that in these inland lakes too. They're fantastic.
It's funny that you see that you said tubes, because when I used to go back up there, the last time I went up there was 2010.
Right.
From like 1998 to 2010 when I fished
Right.
up there, we didn't use anything but tubes.
Well, that's the thing is that's all they see is they see tubes. And then last year we were in a spot, there was no wind. It was dead calm. You know how it is in Sturgeon Bay, those smallmouth, they like wind, they like sun. So there's got to be at least a little bit of wind. But it was bluebird skies. It was dead calm. We came up to this marina in Egg Harbor, and nothing. Didn't get anything. We're throwing tubes. We're throwing jerk baits. We're trying to find everything to throw, jigs. Finally, I pull out the dark sleeper. I said, "Well, there's gobies everywhere, and don't they feed on gobies? That's how they got so big, in the last several years." And I threw it out there. I instantly got a 3.5 pounder. Now, granted, 3.5 pounder is not going to help us in the tournament, but it was a fish. I cast it again, 3.5 pounder. Cast again, 4 pounder. Partner looks at me and says, "What are you throwing?" And I said, so I showed him. Threw it out again. 4th cast, 4th fish. He goes, "All right, I need one of those." We caught so many fish. We were giggling like a bunch of little schoolgirls because we instantly went from nothing to every cast. But we were in an area where it was only 3 and 4 pounders, which weren't helping us. But if we found another area, they would have bit. And they bit the entire trip. You could drag them. You could drop shot them. But the best is just to cast them as far as you can out there and slow crawl them and pause them. And it works on the river system. It works on the chain. It works best on hard bottom surfaces like rock or gravel. It does cut through grass a little bit. I've used it on Geneva. It works. If the jig doesn't work, this will work. So, and the same thing, I'll either crawl it along the bottom or just hop it a little bit, but you can work it like anything. It's a swim bait too. It's got a paddle tail, so you can swim it, but I don't have as much luck swimming it. I do a lot of the slow crawl and pause method.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Usually the 1 ounce, the 3/4 ounce to 1 ounce usually works the best. They have all the way down to 1/4 ounce.
So when you're up there on Green Bay,
Mm-hmm.
There's 5 and 6 pound fish up there.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What were you using to throw these swim baits and drop shots?
I still use that 7-foot Pyara, the 7-foot medium light Pyara. Oh yeah, no problem. There's no problem bringing them because you got to detect the bite, especially if you're going to go down 20 feet.
Yeah, that's why I was asking you that, because it's you're 20 feet down.
Yeah.
Now when I would fish the Great Lakes, I was actually there during the zebra mussel invasion, and we went from using mono, because fluoro wasn't really popular yet, to all of a sudden everybody was using braid, because we realized that those zebra mussels that are now occupy every square inch of the bottom, they're putting nicks in your line.
Right.
And a 5-pound smallmouth.
Yeah, you have to retie quite often, and especially after you catch one, you should retie. I mean, we did a lot of more open water fishing, but still, there's rock everywhere. And there are places it's so clear. There are places you can literally watch 6-7 pound smallmouths swim underneath you, and it's amazing how they don't bite. When you can see them. When you can't see them is when they usually bite, because then there's wind out there. But on Geneva, that's basically what I use for drop shots: 7-foot medium light Pyara rod.
Yeah.
And I'll use that medium 6'6" under the docks. I'll throw a small jig on there, probably a 1/4 ounce to 3/8 ounce jig is one of my favorites. And I'll throw that and use that for structure because that shorter rod allows me to get around and under things at a close range. But otherwise, I have a couple Grant Slams, medium heavy Grant Slams, 7 foot. That's
Sure.
my all around rod where I kind of use that for 3/8 ounce jigs and plastics. I did get a Cuda EXT series 7 foot medium heavy, and I use that for flipping. Because on the Cuda series, if it's medium heavy, is more like everybody's used to a heavy. The medium is more like a medium heavy that everybody's used to. So it's like Cuda series is like I said, medium is more like a medium heavy to everybody else. So you can go a little bit lighter on the Cuda series, but it doesn't hurt because it's got good backbone.
You talked about flipping. Here's my favorite thing to flip. It's another missile baits. This is one of their most famous stuff, the D-bomb.
Oh, the D-bomb, yeah, absolutely.
And what I like about the D-bomb, they got this. I don't know if I can even show this. Yeah, you can see that.
Yeah. Yep.
There's also the baby D-bomb, which is about half this size.
One. There's that one. That's the baby D-bomb.
Baby D-bombs. Okay,
yeah, it's very little.
It's 28 ounce.
Yeah. See how little it is compared to my hand?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
And then that's
probably what you do.
They now come in a bulk pack, so you can get them in the bulk packs in certain colors. Save a lot of money because I'll go through. These are the black red flake, which is probably one of my most favorite. Black red flake in dark colored water is killer. You don't need it to do any other colors. Black, I usually go light and dark and a green pumpkin. That's really all you need. But the black red flake or black any flake, honestly. But it's nice because they actually offer this in a bulk. They have 25 in here, and it's for a good deal on their website. So I usually get the bulk packs. So otherwise, they come in these smaller packs, which are I think 7 each, but still a good price because I think they run about $4 or $5 a pack, so it's not too bad.
So what size jig are you putting, or how do you use the baby D-bomb?
The baby D-bomb usually by itself, most of the time by itself, or I'll put it on the back of one of the Ike's flip out jigs. So Missile Baits also makes jigs.
Yes.
They're made by Mike Iaconelli, or I should say inspired by Mike Iaconelli. And they have a mini flip out jig, which has a smaller hook on there. And then he has a regular flip out jig, which has more of a stouter hook. So they come in the same colors. It just depends on, how big you want that hook. Sometimes like in the spring, because the bait's small, I'll use the smaller hook for that more finesse presentation. This time of year, because I'm doing a lot of flipping and under dock fishing and just off the weed line, I'll use the stouter hook. So, but the flip out jig is the one that they use. They have a micro jig too for the smallmouth on the river, or if you're going to go up to Sturgeon Bay, that micro jig works great. But any of those jigs are fantastic. They skip, they throw great. The hook is a really, really good quality. But I'll usually put it on the back of one of the Ike's flip out jigs.
Okay. So you also Texas rig those sometimes?
Yeah, Texas rigging is how I do it mostly. Either that or the back of a jig, but Texas rigging by itself, I'll do that because there are days where those bass do not touch a jig. They'll touch something that's Texas rigged, and I don't know why, but it's the profile or something. So I just have to go one or the other. They're going to either hit one or the other. They've never not hit either. If they don't hit one of those, then the one thing they do hit, you might know about these, are the Ned bombs. Then when nothing else works, I flip to a Ned bomb. So the Ned bomb that they have has a little tail on the end. So what's nice is when it flips upside down, it looks like a minnow feeding. So which is nice. I really use it in this. This is the silver flash.
Does that float?
No, I don't think it floats, but because of the way it's got a flat bottom and it's a pretty thick. See, as you can see, I'm holding it on the tip and see how it stands up on its own. So you put a mushroom head jig on the end of this thing, it's going to stand up. It doesn't have to float. And that little tail's just waving in the water. It looks like a little minnow just trying to burrow or trying to eat, and those fish are going to come down right on top of it. And these things are the best. It's the Ned bomb, and it's got the flat bottom top on the right there, so it holds it steady upside down. Like I said, holding it on the end, it's not going to flop over. So these Ned bombs come in so many different colors, and I love them. The same thing, they come in these packs. I think there's 10 in a pack. So, and they have a lot of colors. So those are my go-to. If nothing else works, I go to a Ned bomb.
So did you catch fish on those Sturgeon Bay?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
Mostly the dark sleeper, just because once it worked, there's not really, you didn't have to throw it anything else. But for there, a lot of the bass towards the end of this, or the end of our trip, because we did the Sturgeon Bay Open, about 2 days before the open, all of a sudden there were bass beds everywhere. They literally spawned overnight. We went from one
Wow.
or two beds to hundreds of beds, literally days before the tournament. So the great thing to have was the Ned bomb. The Ned was perfect in those beds. If not that, or tube, but usually the Ned bomb did it, or the dark sleeper. That's were the only two things that didn't even need to go to a tube.
And the dark sleeper, that's by Megabass, right?
That's by Megabass, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
If they knew how much I made for them, they'd probably give me a high-end sponsorship for all the money I've made for them already. So because I've had a lot of people turn first they didn't believe me, but now I got people buying hundreds of dollars worth of Megabass dark sleepers, and they're great. But you have to. I've given it to people and fish next to them, and they sometimes can't get a bite on them. It's very, very specific presentation that you have to do with those. But once they on it, forget it. You won't be able to tear off. The only problem with the Megabass dark sleeper is the hook gap ratio on those plastics. It's got a different type of lead weight. It's belly weighted so that the fish actually sits so that the tail is up. It's a paddle tail. So it sits in the current. So I think that's what makes it so unique and why they go after it. But the hook gap between the lead weight and the hook is so minimal that half the fish come off. You go with the bigger Megabass. They have I think a 3.5 inch, 3 or 3.5 inch. Go with the bigger one. You'll get a better hookup ratio.
Oh, okay. I was trying to download a picture of that. I couldn't
Oh, the
figure
dark.
out.
I'll see if I can find it on my phone and I can find it for you. It's let's see.
No, I found pictures. I needed a special. I needed a special
for you.
I needed a special format before I can share it here. I couldn't find one in the format I needed. I could find JPEGs and PNGs, but
You can see that? It's kind of bright. I don't know.
yeah, it's kind of bright.
There you go. So it's like a goby imitator.
Swim bait.
Unique. Yeah, it's kind of It's actually they consider it a swim bait. Like I said, I work it like a jig. I do not work it like a swim bait. I do not.
Okay, so you just crawl that thing along the bottom then.
Yeah. So there you go. That's probably better.
Yeah, that is better. We can tell.
And you see how the tail sits up a little higher? So that actually sits a little bit off the ground. So when you have it on the ground, it's actually the tail's moving. You don't have to move it. So that's why I don't use it as a swim bait. I just let it sit on the bottom, and you just inch it. If you watch the way a goby moves, the goby will inch, stop, inch, stop. So that's kind of how I use the presentation. Makes a huge difference. My partner was slow crawling it. He would get one bite to my 10. And
wow.
But I've been using that thing for 6-7 years before anybody knew about it. I go to Lee's Bait and Tackle out in Elk Grove Village, and John Moy is one of the few importers of Japanese tackle in the country. And I'm lucky to have him locally. So I actually just met with him today, and he had a lot of the stuff, and the dark sleeper was in there. And I said, well, this is interesting, something different. A friend of mine told me about it. He said he likes to use all that stuff. I took it to the river and I said, well, smallmouth eat gobies, right? Why not? And I caught them like you wouldn't believe. They'd swallow it. And that was mostly in the pre-spawn and post-spawn. Towards the summer, it gets a little bit harder because they're again, reaction bites. So they're hitting it. They may not fully get fully hooked. So you have to be careful on the hookup ratio on those.
Okay. Interesting. So we haven't talked about Geneva much.
Right.
Geneva can be a tough nut to crack this time of the year, as I remember.
You know what? I got used to fishing Geneva this time of the year. This is when I spent most of the time on the water. Early spring gets a little rough because of weather. And then you got the spawn. The spawn in Geneva is a unique situation. But most of the summer is kind of even keel. You got the same, there's usually the same hot spots all year. I mean, the whole lake, honestly, you can catch fish the whole lake. And it's going to be mostly largemouth. And what happens is you're going to rotate between open water and dock fishing. And most of those fish are going to be anywhere between 12 and 14 feet of water. And they're going to hit jigs. They're going to hit dark sleepers. They're going to hit drop shot. They're going to hit tubes, your typical stuff. But they're going to be mainly in 12 to 14 foot of water, and you're just going to watch the weed line. So as the summer grows, the weed line will go out further and further into deeper water. So you want to stick on the edge of the weed line. Now, in spots like the flats, by the golf course or anywhere else on the flats, it's all grass. So there really isn't a prominent weed line. So what you're going to look for are the holes in the grass, what we call the slick spots. So you're going to find all those areas where they're in the grass or in the slick spots. The other thing is if you're not finding them there, then they're probably in the grass itself. So you start ripping a jig through the grass or a power worm, and you start bringing that through the grass, and they'll hit that through the grass. So it all depends on the weather. If it's cloudy, they're going to be roaming more. You can get them on top water. If it's sunny, they're going to be thicker in the grass, closer to the weed line or under the docks, because there are hundreds of docks on Lake Geneva. The problem with the dock fishing in Lake Geneva is almost every dock is sitting on top of a crib of rocks. So you got to be careful what you throw in there, else you're going to get hung up every single cast. So, and you have to get really good at casting, because some of those docks are huge, long, huge. They have boat lifts. And those fish are tucked way in there. So you have to get really good at casting. And since those docks are hit all the time, those fish are very particular how they want that bait presented. Too much skipping, too much splash, you'll spook the fish. They're very, very finicky when it comes to how they want things presented. But once you figure it out, you're gold for the rest of the day. You should be able to fish that pattern for the rest of the afternoon.
Wow. So So when you're skipping under there, what are you skipping?
Jigs, usually jigs. You can skip a weighted wacky worm just because most of those docks are in deeper water. They're probably anywhere between 8, I would say it's like 6 to 10 feet of water. So you could throw like a weighted wacky or, like a 1/8 ounce wacky worm, just so it gets down a little bit faster so they don't have to, they're usually going to be sitting more towards the bottom or suspended. But usually like a 3/8 ounce or 1/2 ounce jig I'll throw in there. Just enough. As soon as it gets to the bottom, I already pull it out, because they usually hit it on the fall. But the other thing is that really works really well in the summer is the drop shot. You want to go out to the deeper water and drop shot. There are a lot of fish that are in 20 plus feet. They're fewer and far between, but they are bigger. So you just have to figure out where there's some vegetation out there. I mean, the weed line can go as far as 70 feet. You just have to figure out where. Yeah, that's the only thing. There's humps. So
fishing lake trout on the weeds. Yeah.
Billy Heim, who's one of the guides there, said that the deepest he caught a smallmouth one year was 72 feet. And they're there. Mark O'Neill, who actually runs research and development for Lawrence, actually tests a lot of the transducers on there, and he's marked them at 80 plus feet. So, and this is during the summer. So and they don't need to ever leave, but you're looking at 5-6 pounders. But they never have to leave that weed line because they got plenty of bait down there, so they never have to come in. So you can pick your poison. You can either go shallow and get 3 pounders like everybody else. You can go a little deeper, maybe get a 4 or 5, or go really deep. But again, you're going to go all day for just 5 bites and get maybe 5, maybe a 6. So it's what you want to do. Occasionally you'll get a 5 pounder under the docks or a 6 pounder. Just depends. That's what you got to see. Some days they're going to be out
early in the season. Good, yeah. Lake Geneva I think it was 95 or 96. It was the first time I ever wacky rigged. We were actually wacky rigging Zoom trick worms. Mm-hmm. And I'd never done this. We actually had an Aberdeen hook, and my friend said, "Watch this." He cast it out, and he caught a largemouth, and we saw it come in. And then we saw a smallmouth swimming around. I cast it out, and that smallmouth saw that wacky rig coming down straight. Because it was actually a Nico rig, because we had a little nail weight in it.
Right.
And it was going down, and that smallmouth turned around, looked at it, and took off like a freight train, man. Him and I were both screaming. Mm-hmm. I was 25 years old at the time. I was a lot more excitable back then. Mm-hmm. But that was exciting. I was hooked on wacky rigging after that.
Oh yeah, you can open water wacky rig there. If there's a lot of open water hot spots. You just kind of have to go around, and you'll notice when you start fishing like that 12 to 14 foot line, you could literally go around the entire lake and fish 12 to 14 feet. Usually they're deeper or shallower, but that's what we call the buoy line. You fish the buoy line, which is usually about 12 to 14 feet, all the way around. You're going to hit hot spots of fish. Mark those hot spots down. You could probably come back to them later because there's something there that's holding them. There's so many cribs and all kinds of structure and cover down there that I mean, there's Volkswagen Beetles, there's ice fishing houses, there's anchors, there's boats. I mean, all that's going to hold bait, and that whatever holds bait holds predator fish. So there's a lot of spots on that lake. I mean, like I said, it was funny. I had a gentleman who lives on the lake. He's one of our tournament partners. He was talking to another guy, and the guy asked him, well, where do I fish on the lake? Where's the best spot? He took a line and he drew around the entire shoreline, around the whole lake. He says, that's where you fish. The whole shoreline, basically. Just you got to find the depth they're going to be in. And you could just literally start at one end of the lake and go all the way across the entire 12 to 14 foot range, and you're going to hit fish all the way around. You just got to figure out where. And they're going to just group together a little bit here and there. But it's the whole shoreline. You just got to figure out which spots are going to turn at what time on. The one thing that I did realize on that lake is those fish know the difference between Monday through Thursday and Friday through Sunday. And they know Sunday the worst, because that's when the most boat traffic. I mean, it's night and day with the boat traffic. You could be out there on a Tuesday morning and there's maybe one or two jet skiers, but on Fridays, Saturday, especially, and Sunday the worst, there's about 50 jet skiers zooming right by your boat. And trust me, those fish know those boats are there. There's a lot of turbulence in the water. They're going to hunker down and get lockjaw. So every time you catch fish on Thursday or Friday because you're pre-fishing, you think you got it. Sunday you get there, they're nowhere in sight. So you have to strategize, like we were talking about boat traffic. I do the Fox River, same thing. I got a very narrow body of water. I can't fish Main River docks after 10 o'clock. The water gets muddy and jet skiers are literally going in between us, and you can't keep the boat steady. So you have to make sure you get all your fish by 9:30. So that's where the strategy comes in with the boaters. You have to literally hurry up and make sure you get your best spots and all your fish early, because you're not going to be able to maneuver your boat or cast as efficient as you want to, because everybody either is in your spot or they're running around your spot.
That's funny, because the jet skiers just got in at 3 o'clock. They just got in 6.5 hours earlier.
Yeah.
They were closing down the bars, you know.
Mm-hmm.
When the fishermen were getting up at 3, you know.
Yeah. The fish know. They know when there's boat traffic. They know the difference between the weekend and the week. They have patterns, you know, so.
You know, when I was younger, I did some water skiing, and when your head's underneath the water, you can hear an outboard prop makes a distinctive noise when you're
right. And they can say that the fish can get used to it, but yeah, they got used to it. They decided to hunker down and have lockjaw, or they moved to another location or something. But it makes it difficult to fish, so you have to add that to your strategy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have sat there in the middle of ski lanes and caught bass before, but it's not, like you said, it's not as good as it would be on Tuesday afternoon, you know?
Right. And there are many times where I've had boats. I sat on a conference point in Geneva. It's a point where everybody comes out of the launch and they go around the point and into the main lake. And we've sat just back off the point, and every time a boat came by, we would throw our baits into the wake and usually catch a fish. But what would happen was it was a deeper point, so it would churn up the water, which get the bait moving. So I'm thinking the fish would come up to feed and they'd hit our lures. So that would happen, not every time, but it was once in a blue moon. That's basically what you say. Well, I got nothing else I can do. I might as well try this, and it'll get you an extra bonus fisher there. But if you really want to catch all your fish, you got to get out there literally when the sun rises, before that, and that's going to be your best fishing for the first couple of hours until that boat traffic starts up.
I agree with you. I completely agree with you. Well, hey, Violet, do you have any shout outs you'd like to make?
Oh boy. Yeah, obviously Missile Baits, they've been really good to me. They got some amazing products. I'm newer on board with them. I'm still trying to explore all their products and get all their stuff. And every time I try to do that, it seems like they come out with something new. Like I said, with this magic worm, I'm lucky I've been using it, but they have a different line of colors they're going to be releasing, and that's very unique colors that I think will work really well. Obviously Grant rods.
Absolutely.
Jim's been really, it's not just the rod, but it's also, the person behind the rods. Jim Grant's been just incredibly, incredibly supportive of my career. And he doesn't just stand behind his rods, he stands behind his people. So he's done a wonders for me. But again, in turn, you got to put the work in as well. So I put a lot of work in, but I'm showing a lot of progress in it as well. And with the support, and in this industry, it's all about the people that you surround yourself with. I mean, all these guys behind me, and I got a lot more than the ones on my jersey and whatnot. Like I said, I have personal relationships with a lot of them, and it's not just about who you know. I mean, I put in the work. I put a lot of work in, and I get rewarded, but also these people understand, what I'm doing, because intern at the end of the day, it is about sales. It is about trying to get them their product out there, because they want to share their product with the world, but they're happy to help me move along as well in my career. So, and of course, Lake County Water Sports, because they're the ones who help me get on the water. They're the ones who help me with my boat and all my electronics and my trolling motor. And I just got new power poles, and good Lord, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have been able to do the Mercury event, where I just came back from an event where and I didn't even know about it. Mercury does a phenomenal event for kids every year. They take 100 kids out with, the generous support of over 60 different captains that all volunteer their time in their boats, me being one of them. And we take the kids out on the water for the day, and Mercury just wines and dines us for the day and the kids, and provides them with all kinds of stuff. And it's an unforgettable opportunity. I mean, I had such a great time with the family that was in my boat, and so did everybody else. And so Mercury's been really good too as well. They're a great big company, and they're not too far away. They're only a couple hours away in Oshkosh, which is cool that all the Mercury motors are being made there, which is kind of neat. But yeah, everybody's been really great to me, and I can't thank everybody enough. I mean, and it's the continued support that helps me, proceed in my career and move forward. It's awesome.
Somebody else who supports you is Daiwa Reels.
Of course, yeah, Daiwa's absolutely. They've been on fire. They released a bunch of stuff at ICAST. They released a bunch of new products and reels. They got so many reels now that I can't even keep up with most of them. They're constantly being innovative. So I wish I had all of them.
My buddy Brad Yole, he's from Bassin Magazine. I do the Bassin Magazine podcast with him. Mm-hmm. He told me he couldn't get near Daiwa.
Oh, really?
He wanted to talk to him, and he walked up. He is Bassin Magazine, and he walks up and he just couldn't get close to them. There were so many; they were just barraged for all 3 days. And
oh yeah, they know how to. They were doing all kinds of events on the water and off the water, and it's a company I'm proud to be a part of, because they're I think they're the largest rod and reel manufacturer in the world. I think they're most innovative. I mean, Shimano is a good product too, but I think Daiwa is way more innovative. They got way more on the table. They're constantly trying to improve upon everything and then some, both in the saltwater and freshwater industry. So it's and their product. I'll use their product whether I'm with them or not. I love their product. I've been using them forever, and you don't need their best reels either. I use their 103s, which are about a $250 reel. I could easily replace every single reel I own with that reel in itself and be able to do everything I need to. Now, do I need an exist? No. Do I want an exist? Yes. I would like a Steez as well, because they're really nice and just really high-end reels and rods. But do you need that high-end stuff? No. They make a good quality product at an economic price range. So you can't beat them. I mean, and they're great people too. I deal with a lot of their people personally, and they're wonderful people.
I'd like to show this one more time. This is my favorite rod. This is my Cuda EXT. Mm-hmm. I mean, just look at the craftsmanship there.
Is that the one what do you use that for?
Wacky rigging.
Yeah.
I also use this for swim baiting. I took off the reel because I did have my swim baiting reel on here.
Yeah, but you got to show the craftsmanship of that rod. You can kind of zoom in on every part of that rod. And even to this day, I wish I had my rod. Again, everything's in my boat, but I wish I had the rods that I've been using for the last 2 to 3 years, because they all still look like the day that I got them. And I use two tournaments a week, and they're banging in the back of somebody else's boat, and most of the time, and they still look like the day I got them. It's amazing.
Yeah, I use my fishing equipment hard too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Somebody else's boat.
Yeah.
And
that's the thing and not only is it functional, it's beautiful. That's what I really love about the, and I like the traditional cork handles.
Yes. Well,
and I like that he has longer handles.
There's nothing like cork.
No.
When you
longer handles with more support, and then the guides are also what's also different, and I've noticed from every other rod manufacturer out there. The guides are bigger, so that line flows through there a lot easier than I've seen like the Dobbins rods or the Loomis rods or St. Croix rods. They got these tiny guides, and the castability is horrible on them. I mean, they're great rods.
I don't know why a lot of rod manufacturers on bait casters like to have those micro guides. I don't like that at all.
No. And you know what? Even the spinning rods, they're starting to go to more like smaller guides. And I just don't get it. There's no reason for it. Are they trying to save money on materials? I don't know. But I mean, all of Jim's rods have the bigger guides. So I've never had no issues with castability whatsoever.
Yeah, I can cast those things a country mile. And when you're fishing offshore, not offshore, when you're fishing in the marsh, you need to be able to cast far. A lot of times I'm either surf. Well, I don't ever take my Grant rod surf fishing.
Oh, absolutely.
No, I don't take them surf fishing because I'm not going to put a $200 reel in the saltwater like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I reserve that for the $35 Walmart
there
combo.
You go.
I just don't care if it seizes up after one. But I'm with the Grant rods, I can cast a country mile.
Yeah.
And that's what I need to be able to do that with a lot of times with the situations I find myself in fishing the marsh. I'm in somebody else's boat and let's go over there. They're like, dude, it's a foot deep over there. I have a 20-foot fiberglass boat with a 300 horse motor on it.
Right. But there's a fish sitting there.
Yeah.
That's how we have it on the chain. It's a foot of, I don't get it. It's a foot of water. It's 90 degrees outside and there's a 5-pounder sitting there under the dock in that foot of water. It's just, and you got to be able to cast there. Yeah. Cause sometimes, you can't get the boat in there. Or maybe you just don't want to waste the time to go there. You're just going to kind of play around, and I'll do a lot of fan cast, and I'll cut. And if the fish blows up on something, I know he's there. So then we move in. But yeah, definitely got to have. And in Geneva, you have to cast that far because it's clear water. Those fish can see you, and you want to cover all that water because there's a lot of water to cover.
There is a lot of water to cover. Just like in the marsh, there's hundreds and hundreds of miles of it. And
right.
It all looks like it should hold fish, but just like any other place you fish, you gotta learn the subtle little things that hold fish.
Right.
Like I like to say every time there's no substitute for time on the water.
Mm-hmm. None whatsoever.
And people ask me all the time, what catches fish? I said, confidence.
Yeah. And that's true. I mean, if I'm confident in a location, I'm going to fish it to my best ability because I know I'm going to catch a fish there. If I don't know I'm going to catch fish there, I'm going to constantly change baits, do this, maybe not cast as well. Oh yeah, for sure.
Also, if I'm using the blue-black 48 with a size 2 hook on it, weightless, I have confidence in that, and I know if I cast a cypress tree 3 or 4 times, and I didn't even see my line jump not once, there's no fish there. I don't need forward. I would love to have forward-facing sonar. I'm not saying anything bad about it because I would love to have.
I have it, and it's good. I mean, I know how to. I'm a techie, so I can program with electronics, and I've had other guys come in my boat and say, "Can you help me with my electronics?" I no problem, I can do that. But forward-facing sonar is another tool, just like forward-facing sonar is another tool like anything else. It adds to it, just like side imaging or down imaging. It adds to your abilities. It doesn't make you a winner. It doesn't make you magically catch fish because you still have to understand how to use it. The technology is still very primitive. If they increase the cone width, if they increase I mean, I know that Garmin and Humminbird are working on increasing the imaging on there. It's by a fraction because the problem is it requires such heavy duty technology that they can't keep the price down. If they made it truly where it needed to be, where you're literally it's a difference between winning a tournament and not, it would probably cost you $10,000 to put that unit on. So they got to bring the price down. So they gotta, thin it down a little bit to get it to that $1,500 price mark so that you can, use it, but it's not going to be where it really needs to be. I would give it a couple more years in advancements in technology before I really invest a lot of money into it. But is it good? Yeah. Is it going to make you win? Probably not, but it'll teach you a lot about what the fish are doing.
What I like about it is now we can run up to a cypress tree and, you look at it, it's got 200 leads around it.
Yeah.
And, it's huge. And there's a lot of other cypress trees right there. Forward-facing sonar pointed over towards that. Scroll. There's nothing there.
Right.
We don't need to spend 20 minutes with both of us casting there with different things.
Exactly.
We can just move on to the next. Okay, I see 3 marks there. 2 on the left, 1 on the right. You go for the one on the right.
Right.
So then me and my partner are casting to it, see if any of those fish are active.
Yeah. It helps you make better decisions. It really does.
That's the thing I like about it is it helps you eliminate water, and that's what you have. You know that.
Yeah, and in tournament situation, that's what you need because you're fighting the clock. But when you're fun fishing, Yeah, I mean, honestly, like you said, you can go to one spot and not see a fish, but the problem with forward-facing sonar is everything looks the same. If that fish is inactive and just sitting there, I mean, you could just go to Bass Pro Shops, right? Go look at their tank and see what their bass are doing. They are not moving and they're sitting right next to the tree trunk. Now, if you looked at that in forward-facing sonar, if that fish didn't move because your boat's moving, you would think it was part of the tree trunk. So you'd say there's no fish there. I still would throw a cast in there because it's fishy. And you'd be surprised. And there are times where, you know, like I said, I don't see anything on forward-facing sonar. I cast in there and I catch a fish. So it's,
I believe you.
But you're right. It's another tool to help you make better decisions, because fishing is all about whether you want to stay or whether you want to go. And if you stay, then you go through the baits. If you don't stay, then you got to go look for other fish. That is what fishing really comes down to. Scott Martin said it best. It's all about, it's not about the bait. It's not about the location. It's the decision of whether or not you stay and continue to fish or you leave looking for other fish. That's really what it comes down to.
Wow. It's not very often I get speechless, but you just did it. I don't know how to you just deflated me, man. That was a good little, that was a great way to put that.
Yeah, because really, if you really think about it, if you just keep fishing a certain spot, you could keep fishing, you change some baits, whatever. That's your decision to stay. And you could catch more fish or you cannot. You eat the clock or you don't. Or you decide to leave and look for other fish. Do you look for fish? You leave fish to find fish? Like on Geneva, Geneva's a place where you leave fish to find fish. But on the chain, you don't leave fish to find fish. Yeah, because Geneva, I can be in an area where all I'm getting is 2-pounders. That's not going to win me a tournament.
No.
Sturgeon Bay, same thing. You can leave fish to find fish because you can get into a school where they're all 2-pounders. 2 and 3 pounders aren't going to do for you. You got to leave those fish to find bigger fish. So you got to make that decision. And when do you make that decision? That's what it comes down to. When is that decision going to be made? That's what you have to be good at, is making those decisions, and when. That's what it comes down to in fishing.
That's wisdom.
Yeah, and Scott Martin said it, and he said it in one of his videos, and it was just a quick blurb he said, and it hit me. And I go, well, yeah, that totally makes sense. It's really, it comes down to, do I stay or do I go? Really, that's what it comes down to. And if I decide to stay, that's when you cycle through baits and you start different presentations and whatnot, or you decide to go and do what you were doing there somewhere else. And hopefully that would work for you, because like Gerald Swindle said the same thing. If they're not biting here, they're biting somewhere. And that's true. That's true. Because somebody always comes in in the tournament. I don't care how tough their tournament is. Everybody could be catching one fish and it's 2 pounds and that's it, not catching anything else. You know, there's one guy out there who's got 5 fish and a 4-pounder in his live well. And so, you know, I want to be that person. So
I want to be that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. You got to keep moving, because if it's not working for you where you're at, keep moving. That's all you can do. Because if you're not catching them in one spot, you can't sit there and wait for them to turn on or wait for them to bite. You have to go to where they are biting, because somebody else is already doing it. So you got to keep moving. I mean, you can stop and milk it. Sometimes it works. Again, it's that decision. Do you stay or do you go? So that's really what it comes down to.
I would totally agree. You know, Violet, I know you're a very busy person. You have 10 or 15 irons in the fire at all time.
Always, yeah.
So I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to our listeners here on the Let's Talk Fishing video podcast.
No, well, thank you, Jay. You know, I always appreciate you coming out and taking the time as well. I know you're busy. You got a lot going on as well. So, and I'm always privileged to be able to do these things with you. And I appreciate all your support, because this is really a lot of support from me as well. I mean, this is a way to get the word out and show people what I'm doing and what I'm capable of doing. And, you know, and I just want to contribute to the fishing community. So, and people know they can get in touch with me in any social media in any way they can. I got a website, violetatalley.com. They can connect with me there. All my social media, my resume, everything's up there. So I'm more than happy to work with all kinds of companies, seminars. I do bass club seminars. I do seminars for high school kids. I take people fishing. I'm not a guide, but, you know, I'll take out some of the high school kids if they want an opportunity. I'm pre-fishing. I don't mind throwing somebody in my boat, let them, you know, learn a little bit. Nobody ever gave me the opportunity when I was younger. So I like to open that opportunity to them as well. So, and, you know, like I said, I want to be part of the whole fishing community. So however I can contribute, I love to. Like I said, I volunteered for Mercury this past weekend just because I thought it would be a great opportunity. I met a lot of great people, worked with a lot of kids. So it was awesome because I learned a lot too. I learned how to walleye fish. I don't know how to walleye fish, but we caught 4 walleye and the kid came in the top 5. So it was awesome.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I love walleyes. Boy, that's how I started out in the fishing industry, is from walleyes.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. But man, thank you so much. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in to the Let's Talk Fishing video podcast. Again, my name's Jay Angel. I was your host, and very special guest, Violet Talley. And guys, the Let's Talk Fishing podcast is brought to you by Grant Rods, Crusher Lures, and the American Bass Club. And with that, guys, have fun this weekend, because you only get to do this once. And thank you again, Violet.
Thank you.
And stick around, Violet.
I will.